YouTube theologians, it's a Sunday drive home. Pastor Wolfmueller here. We're in drive. We're ready to go. Today, we got to hear from Jesus preaching on the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, where he has this little line, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Ooh. Now, can you imagine being there? And you're there. I mean, remember the Pharisees were the good guys. I mean, we think of them as the bad guys because we know how the whole story ends. Jesus gets clobbered by the Pharisees. The Pharisees are there stirring up the crowds, crucify him, crucify him. The Pharisees are the ones always after Jesus, saying he has a demon. And so we know the Pharisees as the bad guys, but they were the guys who had handed themselves over to a life of righteousness, holiness, good works. I mean, everything about the Pharisees was about that. And they had in some ways achieved it. In fact, if you were to go and think about who has achieved a upright moral life in the history of people trying to do that in the world, you would put the Pharisees on the list. I mean, they were at least thought of themselves as, if anyone's holy, they're holy. They're trying to keep the Ten Commandments, and in fact, they have all these other laws around the Ten Commandments, so they don't even get close to breaking the Ten Commandments. That's Pharisee style. So you're standing there and watching, and you got to think of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus has this huge, massive crowds there on the hill, the mountain, and he's preaching to all these people, and in and amongst the people are the Pharisees up from Jerusalem, standing there in their Pharisee robes and Pharisee hats and Pharisee jewelry and with their Pharisee beards and everything. And the people sitting next to them, they smell like Pharisees. I don't know, the incense and the oils, I'm sure. All the people look up to these guys. And there they are watching Jesus preach with this, and they got this critical eye, is he going to preach according to Moses or not? What's he going to say? And imagine how they would have reacted when Jesus says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees. And they're thinking, that's right, we are the most righteous. We're the most holy. We're the best of the best. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you cannot enter heaven. Oh, wait a minute. What did he just say? You have to have a righteousness that goes above and beyond those guys? How is that even possible? I mean, Jesus takes the Pharisees and he throws them out of the kingdom of heaven. And he says everyone else who's looking at the Pharisees thinking, I'm never going to be this holy. And if they're not getting in, what chance do I have? If they're not getting in, I'm doomed. Now, at this point, with the preaching of Jesus, we come face to face with the very radical thing that Christianity does. And Christianity is very different than any other religion or philosophy, particularly at this point, because every religion and almost every philosophy, it seems to me, in one way or another, is getting at that thing which is worst about our own humanity. Now, I preached about this morning, so if you heard the sermon this morning, then you don't need to watch this. If you didn't hear the sermon, maybe you want to listen to that instead of listen to me ramble about it when I drive. But every other religion or philosophy is attacking what's worst in humanity. Every reflective thinking person knows that there's something wrong with me, something wrong in the world. I mean, things are just not how they're supposed to be. And each one of us is at war with ourselves. I mean, we know oftentimes what the right thing to do is, but we don't do it. Why is that? Or we we don't know. Sometimes we don't even know what the right thing to do is, or sometimes we think the wrong things. Our thoughts are not right. Our desires are not perfect. Our actions are not holy. Our words are not edifying. There's just a crookedness to ourselves, and we're fighting against it. Now, everybody, the whole of humanity is engaged in this program of trying to be better. I mean, there's just a few people that have opted out of the idea of living the good life or being a good person. And the rest of us are all in this, and we're fighting. And to be a good person means we're fighting against that part of our humanity that's dragging us down. And it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or you're Jewish or you're Muslim or you're Buddhist or you're Hindu or you're atheist or whatever. Almost everyone is going about this fight. You're wrestling with the bad part of yourself to put it down and try to put the good stuff forward. The example of this that occurred to me this morning is the snooze button. The snooze button is evidence that we're at war with ourselves. So my going to bed at 10 o'clock self says, it would be good to be up at 5. And my waking up at 5 self says, my 10 o'clock self was a fool. This fight. Now that's a slightly trivial example, but this is exemplified every day. Now, okay, so here's the point. Every religion and every philosophy and every morality and every person is engaged engaged in a program to fight against the worst part of humanity. But Jesus, and Jesus is too, I mean, that's the business of the Ten Commandments. That's the whole discussion of the fall into sin and the sinful flesh. But the gospel is also at war against that best part of ourselves. Christianity is an assault not only on the worst part of humanity, but also on the best part of humanity. On our righteousness. Now, just so we don't want to be unclear on this, the Lord commands good works, and good works are necessary. And this is necessary in two ways: that we put down the sinful things that we want to do, and that we put forth the good things that bless God and serve our neighbor. I mean, Christianity, like everything else, is at war against the bad part of us. But Christianity also comes along and says there's a danger with the good part. There's a danger with the good stuff. There's a danger with your own righteousness, with the illusion of your own holiness. There's a danger even in your best works, and that danger is that we trust in them. That we try to put forth whatever it is that we have in order to please God or fit in with the neighbor. That we offer before God our own righteousness, our own efforts. Jesus says, if your righteousness doesn't exceed and go above and beyond the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, no way, man. You're not in. So Jesus takes the worst of us and he takes the best of us and he piles it all in one big heap. And says none of it avails before the throne of God in heaven. Now, if that's the case, then what are we to do? If it's not a righteousness of ourself that allows us to stand before God, then what hope is there? And the answer is, well, only if there's a righteousness that comes from outside of ourselves. And that's what Jesus is preaching. That's what Paul puts forth. Remember how he says it, this is 2 Corinthians, this great exchange text, which is so beautiful. He says that he who knew no sin became sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Oh, that's glorious. That we become the righteousness of God. By the deeds of the flesh, Paul preaches, no flesh will be justified. But now a righteousness that comes apart from the law, that is the righteousness of faith for all who believe, Romans 3. So that the righteousness that we need, the righteousness that exceeds the Pharisee righteousness, is the righteousness of Christ. His perfect obedience to God's law, his death on the cross, this righteousness belongs to us. And it's given to us by faith. I remember, here's the picture. I remember when I was a kid, there was two ways to be done with dinner. One was to eat everything on the plate. That's the method that I prefer right now. But when you're a kid, for whatever weird reason, you don't like to eat or sleep. How is it that like the two best things in the world kids don't like to do? Anyway. So you'd play with the food and shuffle it around and cut it in little bites and, act like you're eating. You can't get out of the table till the food is finished, but then you can go, and this is what we do. We say, Mom, can I be done? And she would look at us and she would make a determination, a judgment with her motherly authority. You're done, she would say. Now, I wasn't done. There was still food on the table, but if she said I was done, I was done. And that is how we have the righteousness of Christ. Jesus says, it is finished. We have an imputed doneness, an imputed finish, an imputed righteousness, a foreign, alien, strange goodness that's put to our name and applied to our account, so that he who knew no sin became sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. This is so often missed, I think, in so many Christian churches, that the forgiveness of sins is not just wiping the slate clean, like all the bad stuff that we've done is gone. No, it's giving to us the perfection of Jesus, the holiness of Jesus, the obedience of Jesus, the active and passive righteousness of Jesus. All of that is given to us. And with it comes the life of Jesus and the kingdom of Jesus and the Spirit of Jesus and the presence of Jesus. Oh, glory. And none of it is deserved, and that's the point. I mean, that's the danger of our own righteousness. If I'm presenting to the Lord my own righteousness, my own works, then I think that maybe I'm deserving it, maybe I'm earning it, maybe it's something in me that makes this gift of God mine. But no, none of it. No one is righteous. No, not one. No one seeks after God. No one does good. So that the thing that we deserve is death, but the Lord, out of completely free grace, his gratuitous mercy, his uncompelled goodness for us, comes and delivers that perfection and gives it to us. Luther called it the alien righteousness because it's outside of us. It's not something that I can write my name on. I can't sign it or initial in the corner. I didn't do anything for it. Jesus did it, and he comes and he gives it to me. And that righteousness, I mean, how amazing is it to think that it's not even just the righteousness of Adam and Eve. It's not just original innocence that's delivered to us, but according to Paul, the righteousness of God, that righteousness is what the Lord gives to us in the gospel. That's what we have by faith. And that is the exceeding righteousness that Jesus is talking about. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, how can we possibly get some sort of righteousness that exceeds and surpasses the Pharisees' righteousness? There's only one hope, and it is Christ. Can you believe it? When we poor, miserable sinners when we believe in Jesus, we have it. We're covered with the robes of the righteousness of Jesus. These white, perfect, holy, gleaming robes. That's unbelievable. I know there's people that don't believe this. I mean, I know there's maybe people watching this right now that don't believe any of this. They think it's all a bunch of hogwash. But for you who have the Holy Spirit and have the Bible, can you even imagine anything more beautiful than this? More wonderful, spectacular. That the Lord not only assaults our ugliness and our sin, but He also assaults our feeble attempts at beauty so that He can give us the most beautiful and wondrous thing of all. His kindness and His love and His perfection and His holiness, His Spirit, all in the righteousness of Christ. That's nice. That's Sunday Drive Home. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you won't enter the kingdom of heaven. But for you who believe in Jesus, your righteousness exceeds that righteousness. Because your righteousness is the righteousness of Christ. God be praised.